the cloud. Okay, and then now I'll do the live. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, I'm hitting the button. Hey TaxBots, I am Abby from the Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio, and I am here with Kathy Hoover, our staff attorney for the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Legal Aid. Today we are going to be discussing the W-4 form and how to fill it in, so feel free to comment below if you have any questions and we will answer what we can. So to start us off, Kathy, can you tell us what a W-4 is?
Yeah, sure. A W-4 form tells your employer how much federal tax you'd like them to withhold from your paychecks each pay period. You fill it out when you start a new job, have a change in your family status, or if you just simply want to make changes. This is the example of a blank W-4 form that you can get a copy of from your employer or at irs.gov, and we'll drop a link directly to the form in the comments. You should carefully read this form and all the instructions and fill out the sections that are applicable to you. We're going to go over a few areas of this form that are really important. So, for example, Step one is where you enter your personal information. Make sure you print clearly, check the correct filing status for your personal situation. If you need help determining your filing status, you can use IRS's interactive tool on their website that we will drop in the comments in a few minutes. The second section is if you have multiple jobs or if you have a spouse that works. You will need to fill this section out as well. This is actually the most important section of this form. Failure to fill out this section correctly could cause you to owe taxes at the end of the year. This section may seem like there's nothing to do, so it is very easy to overlook. Your employer will withhold tax based on the pay that you have for your job only with that employer. But if you have more than one job or have a spouse that works, you will need to fill out this section to let your employer know to withhold the correct amount of tax. There's a small checkbox there under number C that you may not notice, but it might be really important that you check. And if you work more than one job at the same time, or you have a spouse that works, you'll need to check that box. And here's a few examples of why this box is so important. For starters, this is a single person that has one job with no dependents. They make about $11,000 a year. And that means if they fill out their W-4 correctly and don't check that box, number C, they will have tax withheld or no tax withheld, and they will have no tax due at the end of the year. However, if that same single filer has two jobs at the same time, making about the same amount of money, if they do not check that box on that form, they're going to be under withheld and owe about $1,000 every year. The employer only has to withhold for that particular job. So if you have more than one job or a spouse that works, you just have to let them know that by checking that box. To continue, if the single filer has two jobs and no dependents, but they do check that box, you can see that they have enough tax withheld to not only pay that tax, but they will get a small refund at the end of the year. So that's why that box is really important, even if you're a single filer, but if you have two jobs. If you're married and have a spouse that also works, if you both make about $11,000 and you don't check that box, you will actually be okay. It's okay to not check that box in that situation. But at the end of the year, you will have nothing withheld and you will have no refund. But if you do not check that box and you make a little bit more, if you each make about 22,000, you will not have any tax withheld if you don't check that box. However, you will then owe about $2,000 at the end of the year. However, that same couple that checks that box on their form, they will actually get a small refund at the end of the year. So just keep those kinds of things in mind. The next section is step 3. If you have dependents, you will want to make sure you fill this section out. But a couple of things to note that if you do have dependents, only one person should claim those dependents on one of their jobs. So if you have a spouse that works, make sure you talk to your spouse to make sure only one of you is putting the children down so that you are not under withheld at the end of the year. W4. These are for other adjustments. For the most part, most people won't need to use this section, but there are a couple things you can do here. If you know you have other income that you don't have taxes withheld on for the year, for instance, a savings account or something like that, you can actually put that information here on your W4 form. And when your employer withholds taxes, they will hold with just a little bit more so that you do not have a debt at the end of the year. On the other side, if you have deductions that are not taken account of in other ways, you can actually list those here so that your withholdings will be reduced slightly. And if you just want some extra withholding withheld to make sure that you are covered, you can just put a flat amount there, like 10 or 15 or $20, and that amount will also be withheld with your paycheck, and you will have a little bit more withheld. The other extra withholding box that you could use this for is if you check your withholdings throughout the year and you realize that you're going to be under withheld, kind of estimate what you think you'll be under withheld, divide that by how many paychecks you have left for the year, and you can ask for that amount to be withheld so that you are covered at the end of the year. Now, you might be thinking, what about exemptions? Where do I list those? This form looks totally different than I'm used to. And that's true. This form came to be just a few years ago, and it might look a little different from the old form. But you no longer have to list your exemptions. All you do is list whether or not you have children in that dependent section. If you have some questions about this form, you can also visit the IRS's website and use their withholding estimator. You put some information in, it'll help you fill out that form to make sure that you are withheld at the end of the year. The more information you have when you do this estimator, the better your calculation will be. So make sure that you have your income, your spouse's income, how many children, and things like that you're going to change. You also can use this anytime throughout the year when you have a change in your family status, like a marriage, a divorce, or you're supporting or no longer supporting a dependent. This way you'll know what to expect at tax time. We see a lot of people come to us at legal aid saying their employer messed up and didn't withhold enough. And as we said it before, this could be because of the mistakes in this form. So even if there is an error, and even if the error was actually made by your employer and not by you, it is still your job as a taxpayer to make sure that withholding is done and that your taxes are paid correctly at the end of the year. So make sure you look carefully at your pay stub and make sure you won't have any nasty surprises at tax time. Sometimes we see people fill out these forms in an effort to actually reduce or avoid withholding altogether on their paychecks to have a larger paycheck. Um, just to know that that's very important that you understand that this form does not affect how much tax you are actually charged. It is only with how much you are withheld. So if you're under withheld, you will still have to pay that at the end of the year. So I would advise you not to do those kinds of things. One last thing, if you haven't filed your taxes yet, or next year when you're going to file your taxes, if you need some free tax help, here is a slide that has some free tax options on it. You can either have them prepared yourself, you can get some virtual tax preparation, and there are lots of sites around Central Ohio where you can get in-person tax preparation for free.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy, and thanks to everyone for watching. If you have any questions that we did not answer or you're watching the recording and have a question, please leave a comment below and we'll go around and answer what we can. You can visit our website. It is lasco.org/tax, lasco.org/tax. Scroll down to our self-help resources and you'll find a variety of helpful resources for navigating tax issues or hopefully staying out of trouble and avoiding them. Stay tuned for future segments when we'll talk about other topics for tax season. Thank you.